Welcome to the Tuning In podcast, where we talk alignment, intuition, and our internal guidance system. We cover woo-woo topics in an approachable and practical way. I'm your host, Dana Evans of Alignful.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. This week I have a treat for you all. I kind of teased it last week, but I have a special guest, Elizabeth Ralph, also known as the Spiritual Investor. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We had really a lot of fun recording this episode. I am recording from the beach in Block Island, Rhode Island, this cute, tiny island. Literally, I was looking out at the ocean as we were talking. And what comes with the quaint island town is that internet is a little iffy. And I had other tech issues, which just was too funny. So my podcast mic wasn't linking up with my computer. The internet was weird, so I was tethering from my phone. And at one point, it cut us off, but I think we got it all figured out. So we have a really beautiful episode for you. And if the sound is a little lower quality than you're used to, it's because I'm on vacation, enjoying my best life, also doing the most fun things like interviewing brilliant guests. So I just want to give you guys a little overview. Elizabeth, I've known her actually. She's also a coach. And I've known her for about 3 years now, and she's such an inspiration to me in terms of money, abundance mindset, investing in the stock market, and really building confidence and personal power when it comes to all of those categories and making it easy. She just makes money feel easy and accessible to everybody. And that's really where I think her brilliance lies. And she's bringing that merging of money and intuition into these spiritual communities and helping everybody have access to investing and wealth building. So she's a money manager and high-level business coach. She's the founder of Financial Story, which I am a part of, the place where entrepreneurs transform from unsure investor to badass money manager. Formerly a financial executive and an energy trader, she shifted her focus entirely in 2012 while feeding Cheetos to a kangaroo on a beach in Australia. And we hear a bit more about her story. She's such a beautiful storyteller, so you'll hear about that in the episode. And she realized that in order to fulfill her purpose of saving unwanted horses, she needed to break free from the confines of the corporate world. So right then and there, she decided to go all in and set up a strategy to achieve financial freedom within 10 years, which she did. The result is the Financial Story framework. It was born, and as was the amazing horse property that she and her wife call Give Grass Ranch. So if you follow her on Instagram at Elizabeth Ralph, you'll get to see all of her amazing animals on the ranch. There's Lucy, the cow, there's Bailey, the horse, there's Pip, the bunny. Oh my gosh, I love her Instagram account. And I love how she merges this bigger why of impact and income in terms of creating her goals. So things that we talk about in this episode, it's a really good episode. We talk about what a FIRE goal is and how you get around to creating that. FIRE goal, financial independence, okay? We talk about what that means, how she was able to retire in 10 years when she set her mind to it by using this FIRE goal. And for her, that was at age 39, y'all. So she had financial freedom by age 39, so she could shift her entire focus to rescuing horses, setting up this ranch, and now inspiring spiritual entrepreneurs to do the same thing. She talks about how we aren't truly motivated by money at our core and what to do about that. And she talks about this beautiful concept of how combining spirituality with money helps separate you from the outside world and creates your independence around what investing means to you. She shares her story of what brought her to this point and how she managed to retire at age 39. What was that catalyst to shifting all of her attention toward wealth building and what it means to actually build wealth. And my question was, isn't wealth building only for people like Beyonce? And her answer is no. And she talks about how and why it's so both accessible and important for all of us, regardless of your income level, to create a wealth building strategy for your own financial freedom, and how multiple streams of income and all of that play into the equation. And then finally, we talk about the difference between manifestation, abundance mindset, investing, and wealth building. Because I know in our community, at least, there's a lot of talk about abundance, about manifestation, but she brings some really concrete practices of investing and wealth building into that conversation to make you unfreaking stoppable. And she is hosting a free workshop on September 7th, and I cannot recommend it enough. Like, you gotta check it out if any of the things I've talked about here are interesting to you. It's the Wealth Building Series for Spiritual Entrepreneurs, where you'll discover the keys to building massive wealth, regardless of where you're starting. The real way to keep your money safe, she debunks that in this episode, and how to create your own successful wealth plan. So if you're interested in that, send me a DM on Instagram or Elizabeth a DM, or I will have the link to sign up in the show notes. So that's September 3rd, Wealth Building Series for Spiritual Entrepreneurs. And if you're not an entrepreneur, trust me, it doesn't matter. This is really just learning how to merge wealth building, investing, and your intuition. So making it a lot more accessible and easy, and creating a plan for yourself that you actually are excited to follow through. So with that, I am so excited to introduce Elizabeth Ralph. You can find her on Instagram at Elizabeth Ralph. And she has a podcast also called The Spiritual Investor. I just love listening to her. Her voice is so soothing and calming. She's so grounding. And that's also how she makes me feel about money. Like, it's calm, it's safe, it's possible for me. And I know that when you dive into her work, when you join her wealth building series, the free series, that you too will start to feel that sense that I have felt for so many years. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll cut to the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tuning In podcast. And I'm so excited today to have special guest and a repeat guest, the spiritual investor, Elizabeth Ralph. And you heard about her in our intro, and you heard about her amazing wealth building series for spiritual entrepreneurs. And now you're actually going to get to hear directly from her as we have this really fun conversation around basically how she kind of weaves the basket of abundance mindset, investing, wealth building, and the idea of manifestation, which is pretty common in more of the spiritual worlds, but how she brings this really beautiful practical aspect to it that allows all of us to be able to feel confident and comfortable and really empowered and inspired by the stock market, by paying your future self, and by creating wealth from wherever you are right now. So I have personally gotten to work with Elizabeth a lot, and I have learned so much from her. And so it's such an honor and a treat to have her on the podcast to really share just some of her nuggets of wisdom with you all as well, because I've acted a lot from what we've done together, Elizabeth and I, and it's really shifted my whole mindset and experience when it comes to money. And I'm invested in the stock market and buying stocks, and now I'm getting my husband into it. And so it's really fun to see what's possible in this realm. So Elizabeth, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is amazing. I love any excuse to spend time with you.
Yes, we're very connected. It's such a treat that we get to do this. So I gave him an intro, but do you just want to also give yourself an intro of how you see the work that you're doing and what we're here today to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a background in finance. So I worked on a trading floor, trading oil and natural gas for about 11 years. And that's actually, that's a big part of the puzzle for me because I utilized that time to build my financial strategy and to go through a step by step process to achieve financial freedom. But along that time, I actually got a little tripped up, right? So I understood the financial piece of it. But then about 3 years into it, I got pretty depressed, actually. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing the money in my bank account. I was on track for it. From the outside world, everything was going perfect. But from the inside world, I was crumbling, literally. I would come home after work and I would just lie in front of the French doors in the sun and I would just like be, what am I doing here? So it combining spirituality is near and dear to my heart because right around that point is when I actually met I would say my first spiritual guru. I don't know, we can kind of say our parents and other people in our life, but he was from India and he brought me all these these yellow paged books with Indian sages on the front, and he kept explaining to me all of this stuff. And at first I was like, what is all of this and why am I learning all of this? But once I merged the two, in terms of getting more serious about why I was doing something, what is my intention here, then I was able to see that we're not motivated by money. We're motivated by our intentions and by our why. And so that's what led me to teach spiritual money, which is effectively it's the language that I speak. It's the language that I learned. It's the language that got me to where I am today. So I actually don't think I could teach this any other way.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I mean, I feel like it's a language that everyone needs to learn, and it's not taught. And I know for myself, definitely, and probably for a lot of our listeners, the idea of being an investor or just like wealth building, all of these things often feel inaccessible to someone like me, right? Or someone who's not making millions of dollars of years. It's like it almost feels like in traditional investing world, we're taught like have an IRA and then that's it. And then save money. And so that feels very limiting. It feels like you're supposed to have more money before you can actually join the conversation and really start to invest. And that's not how you see it, right?
No, not at all. In fact, I do see, like to your point, I do see why people get tripped up because what's fun about investing in stocks if you don't already like that or if you don't understand that world? Like nobody's just going to wake up one morning and be like, oh, there's a totally misunderstood world. Oh, let me go do that. I don't care about working on cars. I just want to drive the car, right? I don't need to know all the mechanics. And so part of it is that people don't realize that you don't need to know everything to be able to create freedom through wealth. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, in my mind, if you don't incorporate where you are like in your spiritual journey with your money, then as I said before, you're not giving yourself that why. But also, if you don't combine spirituality with money, there's nothing separating you from attaching your results to the outside world in terms of, oh, I'm just going to look for my stock price to go up, or, oh, I've lost money, or, oh, I did a bad job at that. And so if you can't separate yourself from the outside world, then you also, it becomes difficult to separate yourself from your own internal self talk. And there's a lot of self-talk that goes on with money. So if you're not able to do that, then there's nothing actually telling you that your situation's not going to get worse. Right? There's no inspirational point to it. There's no point of expansion or creativity. Because if I'm just looking at, okay, a bank account, I've got debt, it's hard to buy this. There's a lot of people out there, I would say, who have debt, they're struggling to buy a house. And they're thinking, well, the stock market is the last thing that I'm going to be, that's not for me right now. But it's not dependent on time in terms of, okay, start investing now. What it is, it's like create the integration process into your life now, which actually gives you that broader, better conversation in order to move forward in a more accelerated way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I just want to pause there too and reinforce this to everyone listening is that, yeah, we're very specifically, and Elizabeth very specifically talks about wealth building through investing, using the stock market, having your fire goals, and which we can talk more about. But really, it's different. What I see is different from what you're doing. There's a lot of people in the spiritual world and the spiritual realm talking about abundance, right? And manifestation and attracting money. And it's really beautiful. And, that's an important conversation. And what you're bringing in and what you're merging is that with this, like with your why. So, right, you said money isn't, we're not that motivated by money. So it's like, what is the why? And then the how in this case is less about like, it's co creating with the universe, but through a very tangible, practical system. And that's what I love because you can see results in a different way and really then you get to shift the other aspects of your wealth management and you're like, oh my God, like everything starts to expand that way. So, will you talk even a little bit more about what you see kind of as the key pillars to the work that you do?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought up the manifestation thing because, those courses, the books, everything, they're fun. I love them too. It's great. And we go through these courses, we read the books, and we feel so like alive. And we do these meditations and things like that. And you know me, I do Kundalini yoga. I'm all about this expanding the wealth capacity, right? But that's only one side of the coin. And I think that's a big thing that people don't realize because you can be a master at bringing money in and allowing money to come in. But where does that get you if you don't know how to hold on to the money or how to amplify the money? It's not going to get you anywhere because it's just like pouring water onto the ground. So you can think of this. I think of spiritual finance as sort of the next level. It's really for people who have done the work in terms of manifestation. They are at a certain point on their journey. They are moving towards expansiousness and greater consciousness, and they are ready to level up when it comes to truly building wealth that is going to support them and themselves, getting bigger and doing more in the world.
Yeah. It's just like when I hear you talk about this, and I shared this with you many times, but when I hear you talk about wealth, right? And that word and building, like it makes it feel one, like exciting and fun, and also really accessible to me. Cause like pre Elizabeth, I'm like generational wealth, like building wealth that's like for Beyonce.
Yeah.
Like that's what she's doing. Me, I'm just like, okay, I just need to earn more money and then just max out my IRA. And then that's good enough. And so I never thought about this concept of building wealth and that it's possible for all of us to do.
Yeah. And you know what? That's more of the norm. And it makes sense because that's what we were taught. So we were taught how to save money and make money. It was like we even tie our own value systems to how much money we can go out there and make. But again, that's only one part of this, because what we weren't taught to do is how to grow money. And that is the most valuable concept. Building wealth, you see this all the time. You see this where, have you read that, where the postal worker who became the millionaire, right? So it's not about the amount that you're bringing in. It's about, honing in on that skill of being able to amplify it. And that's where people get hung up, because they tie this fictitious amount to it. And they go, well, when I'm making more in my business, then I'm actually going to start building wealth. But what is the one thing that you see that's always in common with people who are wealthy? They invested. So you can't, what you're trying to get to, you can't you can't leave out the biggest piece, which you see in the person that you want to be.
And like save that for later.
Yeah, this whole concept of saving it for later, because you're always going to want to make more money in your business. I know I am. I'm always doing that. We all are. So if you're saying, "Let me make more money in my business," there's never going to be that point where you're going to feel like, "Oh, now is the time." So what I encourage people to do is get the process set up. And then it doesn't matter if you're investing $50. How easy is it, once you've got the process set up, to go in and hit the button and increase that to 1,000? So easy.
Yeah, I actually did that recently. I had one of my investments. It was like $100 a month, and just recently I was like, oh, I'm going to make it 150, and just trusting too that those incremental amounts actually make a difference. Like my brain has always worked like I just have to do. If I don't do 1,000 now, then there's no point of doing 50. And so working with you has helped me kind of shift that perspective of everything and anything that you can put in now matters, because you're creating that system in your life that means you prioritize investing for your future.
Yes, absolutely. It's prioritizing that. So it's getting the system, because really, what you're doing when you set all of that up is you're actually saying yes to the universe for more, because that's what investing is. It's like saying, yes, I have positioned myself to amplify money. And what happens when you position yourself to do that? More comes in. And so you've already made that gate wider just when you have, positioned yourself with that $50. But then what ends up happening, and you've experienced this because we've talked about this, is then you look at your account and you're like, oh my God, there's too much money there, right? Didn't you say that one time? You're like, I think there's a mistake. There's too much money there. It's shocking after you do that. And then, because then the market, of course, is working for you, in the background on all of this.
Which is like the market. Tell me if you agree with this, or to me, the market is like the ultimate representation of abundance.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. There is no, in our lifetimes, there has not been a greater way to build wealth. I mean, that is literally like the money engine, and everybody has access to the money engine, but it's just like people don't show up at the train station and hop on. It's pretty mind blowing. But I think that now, I really feel, I have felt called to do this work for a long time, because, it got me to where I am now, and I love it. Um, but I think now it's actually gotten, I feel like the calling for me has gotten stronger, because there's so much going on in the world in terms of division and uncertainty and all of this, that like the more, um, I would say, the more spiritual entrepreneurs who can position themselves right now and can utilize wealth as a tool to create more freedom and independence in their life, the more that they can make that a priority now, I think the better they're doing for themselves and their families, and also the people that they are getting ready to serve. Because as I said, it's a statement. You set the bar, right? So you said that, originally you said that you felt like wealth was for Beyonce. And now then you're like, no, it's not. So you had a better conversation with yourself. You suddenly said, okay, at some point you said, wait, this is not just for people who are out there. This is for me as well. and it's positioning you to do so much more. I know you have like a nonprofit in your sights coming down. You want to own rental property, all of that. You're going to have the option. Right now the real estate market is pretty high, but who's not to say that you're not positioning yourself already with your investing to at any point transition that investing account into a down payment on your rental property.
Yes, right. And it just opens up, what that does is it's opening up possibilities. And that was one thing that I've really have learned from you is like that the fear of putting money in. So, and if you could share this to the audience, some stats around this, because I know a lot of resistance that comes up for people when they think about using the market. Like, they're like, oh my gosh, well, you only have so much money. Like, if you put it in the market, it's gone. And what if the market goes down? So, what would you say to someone who's that's one of their biggest fears?
Well, I would say we have a perfect example just recently of that when we went through the beginning of the pandemic when the market dropped 34%. Now that was, a time where everyone was like, oh my gosh, what's going on health wise, like everything. So, but that has been the biggest drop that we have seen in over 20 years because that one actually even exceeded what we saw in 2008, with the financial crisis. But let's just include that one. So if we include those, then and even if you include all the ones that go back 100 years since the market began, since we started really tracking the metrics on the market, still, after all of those drops, on average, you've been able to make a 10% return year over year. Now, it's just not 10% one year. It's like, okay, you've taken your $1,000 and then you've created $1,100. Then the 10% gets multiplied on top of the 1,100, and then the next year on top of that and on top of that. So it's the compounding effect, right? That's why at the beginning, if you'd put $10,000 in the market in the beginning, that would be worth 55 million right now because of the compound effect. So I would say that if people are afraid of the dips, then I would really go a layer deeper with that because that's coming from within you. That is not coming from something that you have been shown. As a matter of fact, let's just say that you had panicked during that drop in March of 2020. Let's say you had panicked and sold all your stock. So if you'd had $1,000 in a stock account, you would have lost 350. So that's not great, but that's still not going to, you're still not going to put you out on the street. I think that people are afraid. They're like, oh my gosh, every dollar I put in there is a risk of losing it. Well, I would actually say the opposite. I would say not investing right now is riskier because cash is losing every single year for the last decade. Cash has lost 7% of its purchasing power, which means that every year, unless you are bringing in 7% more, then you're not even staying true to, like, you're not even keeping up with things.
Well, if that's not an argument for investing, because then you said on average the market's making 10%. So you could be losing 7 or making 10. Like, when you look at it that way, it sounds so simple, as you are very gifted at helping it be simple. And it's kind of like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it is. And I think that I think where people find themselves sometimes, and this is just, based on a lot of, feedback that I've heard, is that people equate the word investing with risk. Like investing is risky. And I know we probably got a lot of this from our parents and, oh, don't take all that risk, save your money and all that. When investing does not have to be risky. Now, obviously, if you're going to let anyone borrow your money, there's going to be some risk involved, right? But you don't have to take a ton of risk. You can take a lower level of risk and still be better off than if you just left everything in cash, right? So yeah, it's, I think, the financial industry they've hidden a lot of this, to be honest. And our parents did. They had to have a financial advisor to be able to even access all of this, right? So it's kind of been like this unknown world with like this veil, like operating behind this veil. And so now it's more transparent. And so we saw 10 million new investors enter the market just last year. We have never seen so many investors in the market now. Now what we're starting to look at is, okay, people are investing, but now then what's really creating a leverage factor for people is, if not only are you investing, but do you know what you're doing? Because a lot of the newer investors, we get to track the data, right? You could see it happen. You see like Tesla comes out in the news, and then you see all of a sudden a spike for the Tesla stock on Robinhood. And so it's like what they're buying because, a lot of them, it's like, okay, I need to buy because of FOMO. I'm going to miss out. And they're selling because they're like, oh no, a bad report came out on Tesla. I don't want the stock anymore. So they panic. And so they sell it, right? So you're seeing a lot of that is adding volatility to the market, but that only creates more of an opportunity for people who can stand on the outside of that. And, that's the observer effect from, the spiritual perspective, from making decisions from a place of neutrality. Like that, spiritual investors have such a huge point of leverage right now if they would just combine these two. So much beyond just the typical investor that's going to go out there and just buy a stock they saw in the news, because spiritual investors can tap into their intuition. They can leverage the synchronicities, their greater level of awareness, and bring all of that into their wealth building. And it's incredible.
You answered my next question, which was, how do you define the spiritual investor? Because, we just spent quite a bit of time talking about the practicality of the market and investing. And it's like, okay, and then how do we weave that into this other world, right? Like I talk about using your inner voice and your intuition and slowing down and creating space and making decisions from like the peaceful calm within. And you're saying that we can use all of that when we're playing with, and I said when we're playing with the stock market and investing and our wealth building practices.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I just, I had an example of that this morning. So, and this, touches on another thing too, because I think a lot of people think that this takes a lot of time and energy, but really, again, setting up the process. After you set up the process, it actually takes minimal time. So just this morning, I saw stock, and I was like, I've seen this before. Things like sort of like the synchronicities, right? It like bubbles to the surface. And I saw it, and I was like, this particular stock. So it's a satellite company. And so they are now in talks with some of the bigger companies like, Apple. And so the new feature on the Apple phone is going to be able to communicate with satellites. So then it's like, so really it's tapping into, what are you already feeling is going to be important for people. Now, bad cell service, people, if they could tap into the satellite when they step into bad cell service, that's going to be important to a lot of people, right? So then you say, okay, well, then you can start researching, well, what stocks would benefit from that. And so there was this stock that I bought this morning, and you know what? When I looked at the financials, I was like, God, this thing doesn't even look good. Like Warren Buffett would not, and I'm a huge Warren Buffett fan. I was like, Warren Buffett would definitely bypass this stock. But still, I was like, you know what? I have a good feeling about it. So it was the stock's $2. I'm like, look, what is the downside of this? Almost nothing. But the upside is enormous. And that's what, Jeff Bezos always says too, the CEO of Amazon. He's like, I cannot figure out why everyone doesn't put as much as they possibly can in the stock market, because the downside is limited to 100%. The upside is unlimited. So when you start thinking about it, you're like, wait, why am I not doing this? Like, putting $200 into a stock that has the potential to increase 30-fold is really a no-brainer.
it's just such a shift, and I see this in the work that you do. Like, I feel like your work is avant-garde right now. Like, the you're ahead of everyone else in the investing world because you're talking about this through this intuitive perspective. And when you think about the shift that's happening around, which is where like major structures and systems are starting to kind of break down a little bit, and it's things are coming back toward like sovereignty and the individual. And so you think, wow, so instead of like hiring a broker to use his mind to manage my stuff, I can actually turn inward and use my intuitive guidance and feel into the nudges and make decisions from that. And like you said, often you can see, both short-term and long-term results of the effectiveness of that. And so then you're taking charge versus saying, our parents' generation was like, here's my money, let's hope it lasts me through retirement. And now we're saying, how do I want to co-create with the universe, with the stock market, so that I'm actually excited about the wealth that I'm building, right? I've had so much fun. Like John works in renewable energy. So we've purchased into some renewable indexes. Are they index funds?
Probably.
Probably, yeah. And so it's fun that like we can put our money behind causes that we really care about as well. And so it's like you to circle back to what you started this conversation with, which is getting clear on the why, not just the what. So it's like more money, great. We love that. But what's the why behind that? And I'll have you talk about that more. But even just the idea that I can put money into stocks that I really care about versus just the run of the mill stocks because I should do it that way.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I love the way that you explain that because it really is a co creation process. And money is energy, and it should be a co creation process. And also, I think that you're exactly right. I have felt that to a core level that this is very futuristic thinking when it comes to money. But I think that this is going to become a bigger conversation. It absolutely is because we're all moving towards consciousness, and we're not going to leave money behind. In fact, I would say if you're on a spiritual journey, and I've laughed about this the other day. I was talking to someone, and I was like, okay, so if we're on a spiritual journey and we're going through all this, and we're doing our breathing exercises, and we're doing our meditation, and we're all of this stuff, and then we get up off the cushion and we go and we sit down at our computer, and then we feel horrible, like we just feel it right in our gut, then like, how is that not part of your spiritual journey to bring that point of awareness back and clear that energy up as well? And I think so people are starting to realize, that is that expansion point. And in terms of, you know, um, putting your money with someone else or a financial advisor or something like that. Like, I mean, there's no reason that you shouldn't use your own power of this, like you were saying, like being able to recognize all of this and get behind things that are meaningful to you, like you and John just did. There is a point where, and there is a specific time in your life where you might need a financial advisor, or you might want to keep one, and then you just have a bigger conversation with them. You're more involved in it, right? Because the fact of the matter is, a lot of the financial advisors today, they're not necessarily focused on some of the newer things like crypto or social impact investing. So even if you had someone to just do more of the basic stuff, and you're like, hey, I want to pick stocks and investments that resonate with me, I want to have fun with this, then what you're doing is you're bringing that money back in, because anything that you hold at an arm's length distance energetically is going to hold you there too. I believe that. You can't, like, if you don't put the energy into a relationship, let's say you meet someone and you're just kind of like half-assing it, or you set a dinner date with them and you don't show up, then how, there's not going to be a return on that. right? That energy is not going to come back to you. Yet that's what people do with their money. They're like, oh, I want you to show up for me. I want you to be there when I need you, but I don't really want to learn anything more about you. That seems too hard. I don't want to do that. Like, that's a crock. That's a bunch of bullshit, to be honest. Like, if you want money, then set the bar higher, get in there, because that energy is waiting for you. That energy, that money, that wealth wants to come to you. But you have to, like we said in the beginning, not only allow it, but take that responsibility with it as well. Take that responsibility to, hey, thank you for coming to me. I am going to do something magnificent with you. And part of that is I'm going to amplify you.
Yeah. Oh, yum. Amplify you. Yeah, because I imagine money wants to be used. Like it wants to expand and so when we show up, one of my big awareness points in working with you was I didn't trust myself with money. And so I wanted it, but I was afraid to have it. And that's like, come to me, wait, no, don't. And so it created a very confusing situation. And I was like, well, I don't trust myself to invest. I don't trust myself to save. I don't trust myself in what I'm spending. So it was like, it was showing up in all aspects of my life. And I was like, well, how could I don't want to amplify lack of trust in money. I didn't trust the money would show up. Like, so there's all of this exploration that I got to do. I was like, oh, I see now. And so by leaning into the trust more, then I could play with it differently. And so it wasn't such a fearful conversation.
Yeah. And do you see how that lack of trust was a block? And that could have gone on for a lifetime, like easily. It happens. And you could have taken every money manifestation course in creation, but with you, I know specifically you shifted when you actually set up the process and started doing it. And when you were like, hey, I just bought a stock and I just looked at my account and there was more money there and I'm having a blast with this. Like, you needed to create that. Like, it's all fine and dandy. Like, we want to tell our brains, oh, let go of the story. Oh, I don't want to believe that. And to a certain level, we can do that. I think that money brings up so much fear and lack and, just preconditioning that it's really hard to do that with money, because we actually do need to open, our minds to it and expand our wealth capacity. But at the same time, we need to give our brains a little bit of evidence. We need more than just this, okay, I'm going to dream about it. We need that to actually feel and see that path, like those, get the dollars in the bank account and then let me feel better. And it creates this momentum when you do that. So it's a bit like, once you do that, like you hit that point where you were then seeing that you were making money in stocks. And it was a bit like, you're stepping onto the magic carpet at that point. Like, you're energetically having to give out more because you've gotten yourself to a different place. And then you're making that decision from, hey, I've already done this. Now I'm starting to trust myself with money.
Yeah, and it takes away some of the like it demystifies it. There we go. It demystifies it. And then you're like, oh, like this can be an exchange. Like I can work with this energy versus just being afraid of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that people go a long time feeling like that this stuff is difficult. And that's one of the big things that, I really, really want people to realize is that you don't have to be a financial wizard. Like, sure, finance, of course, there's nuances that can be difficult, but you don't even need to know that stuff. You also don't need to love stocks, as we saw from you. And we've had other people who have gone through the program and been like, oh, I hated stocks, but actually now I like them. It's kind of fun. But, we have people, you can choose your flavor. And I think that's probably another thing that really stands what I would consider like this whole spiritual money world. I think that's another thing that separates it, is that you get to decide what wealth means to you. Wealth doesn't mean having $1 million house. Wealth could be living in a tiny home and being able to travel more and being able to work part-time and still have your bills all paid. Wealth could mean like so many different things. And so it's really about starting where you are with it. Like, you don't have to be like out of the womb good at math, like good with numbers. Because I know a lot of people think that too. They're like, oh, I can't be good with money because I'm bad at math. Oh, like realize that that's just a story, and don't let that stop you. Don't let that deny you, because I really feel like right now, if people aren't taking a portion of what they earn and amplifying it, they're actually denying themselves of future independence and future freedom. It's just that they don't realize it yet.
Are there so that sounds like, yeah, that might be kind of a common mistake, to use that word. What we don't necessarily use that word a lot, but a common misalignment that is happening with money. Are there any other ones? So it sounds like one for sure is people, if you're just not using the market at all, then that's not serving you. Are there any other things that you're kind of seeing, especially in the more spiritual world, where you're like, you want to tell people, be like, if you just do this one thing, I promise it'll help.
Yes, there's a few of those. The one that really, came to mind when you asked that was the this whole concept of playing it safe. So most people think that whatever they're doing with their money right now, that's the safe way. And when they have more money, then they'll start to take a little bit more risk, with investing, or like, but safety with money is an illusion, just like safety, in the world is an illusion. And so safety with money does not mean sitting on the sidelines and continuing to just concentrate on how can I make more money, and let me just pay off my debt, and let me get $5,000 in a savings account. In fact, that's the least safe thing that you could do, because you still, even when you hit the what you would consider your goals with that, you are still only bringing in and relying on one source of income. So you're still basing your entire life, the food that you put on your table, like your kids, like paying your mortgage or rent, is still based on one stream of income, and it's earned income, which is dependent on the economy. And so if you're basing your entire life on earned income, then in actuality, you're one step away from poverty. And I think that that is something that I don't want to say that it's going to hit people at some point, but I think that it's going to hit people at some point. If I'm being honest with you, because I look at things definitely through the lens. Everything I do is looked at through the lens of an investor, and very much from a macroeconomic standpoint in terms of what's going on. Like, I'm always looking at things from a zoomed out point. And if we've had a lot of, money printing, so we've increased our money supply. We've got a lot of debt going on out there. And so you have to assume that at some point there's going to be an intersection point. We're going to feel a squeeze at some point. And it's probably even going to come from the corporate level, because, corporations carry a lot of debt. And so, but we're going to start to feel that. And so, right now, building wealth is about, it's not about a number amount. Building wealth is about positioning yourself now, saying, no, I'm not going to be susceptible. I am not going to be fully independent. And when that time comes, you might only be getting 20% of your cost of living covered by earned income. But do you know how happy you're going to be about that? And maybe you'll be getting 50% of it covered by that. Who knows? But it's creating it's really a different way of thinking, to be honest with you, Dana, because wealthy people would not, in a zillion years rely on one source of income. Yet that's the exact mistake that poor people make. So it's shifting into that thinking. I said earlier, set the bar. People have to set the bar higher for themselves, because I think it's a tired conversation. Everybody knows they need to be maxing out their retirement and doing certain things, but they're still not doing it. And that's because I think they're tired of that plain vanilla arm's length conversation. I think that looking at it in terms of independence and freedom is how you see things differently.
And you're here to shake that up for us.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So one more question here, because I think this is an important aspect to kind of dive deeper in, and because it will get people thinking. And I know they're going to be able to do more of this in your wealth building workshop, which is coming up on what is the date on that?
September 7th.
Okay, that was what was in my mind. But yeah, September 7th.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is so unique about what you're doing and helping people do is diving into the why. Because one thing you taught me was that wanting to make more money, especially from a single source of income, like I want my business to make more money, there's a point of diminishing return,
Mm-hmm.
to use a financial term, where I'm not as motivated to make the money. But if there's something else that's driving me, it's going to both increase my impact and my income. And that is the why. So can you talk about that a little bit and maybe give us a taste of what your why is? Because it's very powerful.
Yes, absolutely. So as I said, like when I was on my, the beginning of the financial journey, I was, humming along, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? I felt depressed and all that. And so once I, merged the two, the spirituality and finance, then I was able to kind of go to that next level and go, okay, well, I'm not motivated by numbers in a bank account. I think, few of us really are. It's nice to have, but it's not a sustainable high. It's a blip, right? But what I was motivated by was my desire to help horses. And so there are 150,000 horses that get shipped across the border every year for slaughter because they have nowhere to go. They have no home. And, some of them are older and sick, but a lot of them are young, just born, or mares that have just had foals. And what happens is some of these are racehorses, some of these are actually wild horses that get taken off of the land because they just, with building and with farming and all that, it's just they have, so families get separated. Stallions that have had families for decades, they get separated, and you see them, and they literally. This is just going to sound like kind of awful, but when they round these horses up, they try and put them in different pens, but they so strongly want to be not separated from their family that they crawl over these pipe corrals and break their legs to try and even get to their families. And so it's really awful. And I saw a videos down in Mexico of horses that were in a chute, and they were being brutally killed, and I decided in that moment, I was like, this is not acceptable to me. I raised my bar in that moment. And I thought, you know what? My why was I wanted to cover my cost of living and my long-term retirement, because I never wanted to have to be susceptible to not being able to do everything that I needed to do in order to help horses. So I knew that getting those basic boxes checked off for me, I knew it was going to open me up to a whole new world. And so what I did is even at that time, I just started, my wife and I started donating money to horse rescues. Well, then what happened is, as you step into something and then the synchronicity comes up and it starts guiding you, right? And so then what happened is we started going to these horse rescues on the weekends. We would go and visit them. And then I started noticing, I was like, God, some of these are not well run. Some of these actually were quite corrupt. Like they weren't even being looked at, and the money wasn't even being used for horses. Then I thought, okay, well, how can I now use my business knowledge to be able to help these organizations? And then I thought, well, I work on a trading floor 12 hours a day. I can't, that's just not even possible. So then I was like, I need to position myself to where I am still making an income, but I'm not actually here. And so it was like one decision after the other, after the other. And then our first vacation rental that we bought, we decided before we even purchased it that a portion of the proceeds was going to go towards horse rescues. And as it turned out, again, not planned, we ended up finding I kid you not, within the first week of searching, we found a carriage house that was built in 1913, and it was in the historic district of San Diego. I mean, it's like, what are the odds? Those all got torn down, like torn down for bigger houses, right? So we're like, this is so random. So we ended up buying that, and then for people who knew that we were involved in horses. So what happened? People wanted to stay at the vacation rental because they wanted to be involved in horses, and then we started meeting people from all over the world who had horses, and then we would like go and meet them for wine and hang out with them and learn about their lives and their experience with horses. So then we became sort of like, okay, we're connecting the horse world and the human world. And then before you knew it, people were leaving like cash envelopes, like at the vacation rental going, please give this to the horse rescues. And so it was one thing after the other. It was like us really defining our why opened up a whole magical world of this whole like horse. But then we were making money, which we were then invested, which is then helping me actually get to that point of financial freedom to where I can actually leave the corporate job and to move into something else. So again, it goes back to, don't wait, create the magic right now where you are. But, as you tapped into, you've got to have that why. But once you have that why, there is nothing stopping your intuition and your creativity and the combining of the knowledge and the tools. You're unstoppable at that point. That's when the universe gets behind your back. I know that's that saying, but that's when you're really calling it in, is when you combine all of those.
Oh my gosh. And I'm sure everyone listening could hear how your own energy shifted when you were talking about your why. Like, that is just that inspiration, that joy. And then if you were to speak about that from a law of attraction standpoint, right? You're going to attract that abundant energy, that joy, that inspiration, which you just described through that beautiful story of, you went from like, literally, you were like, what is it called? Like on the stock market floor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the trading floor. Yeah.
Okay. On the trading floor, 12 hours a day, like trading stocks, big money. And then hit that moment. I'm like picturing a timeline, right? Where you were like, didn't have the satisfaction. Your wife, did she race horses?
Yeah, she was a professional racehorse jockey.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool. So professional racehorse jockey. And then like you find out about like the damage to these horses and these things that you care about. And then that kind of spikes your desire to like, oh my God, now I know why I want to have more money, right? Now I know why we want to create more money. And in fact, cover your expenses. When she says financial freedom, right, you effectively retired. I'm using air quotes because she retired from having to work on the trading floor at 39, was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
39.
Yeah.
Guys, did you hear that? Through her own investment strategy, which is what she teaches her students, so that all of your energy and attention, you still had your basic, your lifestyle was covered through your investments that you had started on, so that all of your energy and attention and additional money could go toward the thing that you care most about, which is your ranch, saving horses, right? Donating to charities, having your own horse saving, and then now you're teaching this same work in the finance world to spiritual investors. Like, that's a why.
Yes.
Like, what would we call your story? From the trading floor to ranch owner? Like, what would you?
I know. And so many blips and ups in between, let me tell you, because this has really been, so I'm 47 now. And I started when I was like 30. That's when I decided to do this. So this has been a 17-year journey, and you can't plan. I mean, you have to align with this. You cannot plan this stuff. And you know that better than anyone.
That's a quote right there. You have to align with it. You can't plan it. Yeah. And in doing so, I mean, you could still be stuck on the trading floor.
Oh, for sure. And, it's funny because as part of the financial strategy, because I had built like a financial model for myself. So I knew, if things went well and I had a certain rate of return, what I was going to have at a certain point. And so what I did is I just I extended it. So I had 2 points where I actually set up 2 decision points. I was like, okay, if I leave at 39, then I'll have my basic cost of living covered, right? So like I don't have a mortgage or anything like that. And then I would have my long-term retirement. So I basically have no bills and I have already covered my retirement. For me, that, like I said, everybody gets to design this for themselves. That was my two important things, because I was like, then I can actually walk out that door and feel at ease. And that's really what I encourage people to do, is like find what is your point of ease. But then what I did is I was like, okay, how many more years will I have to stay to literally just like be like where I just couldn't even spend all the money, right? Where I would just need to, I would never need to go out and make another dollar kind of thing. And it was 46 and I could have stayed there. So yes, really, I could literally still be there to this day. But I made a choice. I was like, that's more important to me, to get out there, to help the horses, but we immediately bought the horse ranch as soon as I left. I think it was like 6 months after I left. We bought the horse ranch, and then now we have a place where we can take some of these horses in, and then my wife can actually retrain some of them, because instead of like, because a lot of times these horses come off the track and then they're just kind of wild, and they can't really be someone's riding horse. And so it's, we do a lot in terms of providing that middle point. But like you say, I could have just as easily not done that. But and I actually get a little depressed even thinking about if I had not like I'm like, would have even lasted? Like, seriously, because, we tear ourselves down health wise. And that's another thing. Do you know, when I left the trading floor, I was like 3 sizes heavier than I am. I mean, I was never like huge, but I was like, now I'm fairly small. And do you know, within 4 months, that weight completely dropped off. I did not diet. I did not do anything. That weight was misery. It literally was.
Well, right. And so by choosing to leave at 39, well, by setting yourself up to choose to leave, to be able to choose to leave by 39, you also chose your quality of life. And if you guys watch, oh my gosh, I love Elizabeth's stories on Instagram at Elizabeth Ralph, and we'll link that in the show notes. But you get to just see her days spent on the ranch. So yes, she didn't retire and stop doing everything, though she could have, but she has this beautiful ranch. She has my favorite cow, Lucy.
Yes.
Wait, is it Lucy?
Yes, it's Lucy. Yeah.
Lucy, Bailey the horse, Pip the bunny. I love all of her animals, and like you feel like you know them.
Yes. Yeah, I know. They love being on Instagram. They seem to love that. They always like show up for that. And yeah, some people tell me, they're like, I show my kids your stories, and like they become like characters, like, oh, let's see what Lucy's doing today.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yes, they totally light up my world for sure.
I love that. And it just goes to show, what it means to have chosen this for yourself and to have opened yourself up to the ability to choose.
Yes, yes. And, again, this was, sometimes things happen and you look back and you're, oh, I understand why that happened a little bit more. But I didn't realize at the time that, because we bought the horse ranch so that we could help more horses, but I didn't realize at the time that the horse ranch ended up being a lot for me as well, because I needed, it was like my spiritual journey accelerated when I did the transition. And what this space is, the ranch, is really just the outside physical freedom that I needed in order to go deeper with the internal freedom. And I didn't even connect those two until, much, much later on. But yeah, just being I'm just in such like gratefulness. Like, how could you not be, looking at all of this? And I think that that's part of this spiritual with the financial combination as well, is it really encourages you to rely more on looking at the abundance that you already have in your life, instead of looking back and going, well, I should have done this different, or, oh, it's too late for me. A lot of people are like, oh, can I do this? Or, maybe it's too late. I'm like, no, it's actually never too late. In fact, if you combine these two, spirituality with the money, it's accelerated wealth. I mean, who achieves financial freedom in 8 years? Like, the plan was 10 and I did it in 8. So, I mean, most people don't do that in 40 years, and I'm not putting tickets on myself, as my wife would say. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm sharing this because I want to encourage.
I'm going to pat you on the back. It's
I
so
want,
inspiring.
I want to encourage other people, to see that this is fully possible for them. You can absolutely, I don't care where you are right now, you can put together a fire goal, right? Dana, you mentioned that earlier, financial independence, retire early. You get to define that. It does not need to look like the world's. It does not need to involve $1 million house. You can put that together for yourself. And you can do that and you can have it done and the box is checked off in 10 years. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's what Elizabeth teaches also in her brilliant program, Financial Story, which it like blew my mind when I learned about that. And then, like you said, like once you start, you gain momentum. I'm curious. So you said that you could get to that point when you left at 39 versus 46. At 46, you'd never have to worry about anything. But by making that decision at 39 and stepping into this new lifestyle, like, did you also find that your financial success skyrocketed?
That's such a great question. Not at first. So the first couple of years after I left corporate and, went into this whole transition period, it was really an awkward time for me because I had sort of been on this one train. And then I didn't realize that there was such a big difference in that train versus the one that I had stepped onto, which is the world of being an entrepreneur and then running, a horse ranch. And it was funny because I think I was just so exhausted as well, just from being in that world, that I didn't recreate a new plan for myself. And so I just kind of flailed around for a little while. And also I thought, well, I'm just going to, really focus on horses and things like that. And what ended up coming up for me, and I learned this through working with a coach, is that I had my own money beliefs when it came to being an entrepreneur. And I was raised by all of my mentors, and my family had like the jobs where you go and you work hard and you're gone all day, and more of a corporate type of thing. Like you work hard and then you get paid well kind of thing. And so I didn't realize that I was operating based on that money belief. So here I was being an entrepreneur and having a great time. And I was just having fun all day and creating new content, talking about this weird spiritual financial stuff. Like, it felt very airy fairy. And so, but deep down, I didn't really believe that I could actually do as well as I did before. So then what happened is I was like, this really, really deep subconscious, actually, it was pretty much a fear of like, well, I've already built all this stuff before. So I just have to keep capitalizing on what I've built before because I could never build that again as an entrepreneur. And so I had a bit of the reverse. Like a lot of people are like, well, they can't imagine themselves making that much money. And I was kind of like, well, I can't imagine remaking that money unless I'm as miserable as I was before. So, and that I've just compressed that explanation. But that going through and figuring that out took several years. So I didn't make a lot in the beginning. And then even when I first started Financial Story, I didn't have the structure with it. I was just kind of all over the map with it. And it wasn't until I really, really got serious about, okay, again, finding my why. It always goes back to that. It wasn't until I really got serious about what my new why was. And my new why was positioning spiritual people to have wealth so that they can go out and do more. So it was like I had held on to that one why for so long, and I hope this is making sense, is I'd held on to it for so long, and then it's almost like I checked that box, but I never realized I needed a new box, and the new box looked very, very different. And the new box required honestly a lot more of me because it's easy for me to put numbers together and invest and build wealth. What wasn't easy is for me to step up and start, sharing my truth and being like, okay, here I am front and center with all of this. And once I did that, though, once I dropped the, fear of being seen, really, 'cause that's what it comes down to, everything opened up. Absolutely everything opened up. And the ironic part is that now I have bigger businesses coming to me wanting to then, like CEOs of these larger businesses are coming to me going, hey, I don't want to be doing this anymore, but I also don't want to go down to nothing. Can you help me create additional streams of income? Basically, capture all this money that I'm bringing in and help me create additional streams of income. And I'm actually seeing a trend with that too, Dana, even with entrepreneurs, because I have quite a few seven-figure entrepreneurs that I work with, on a one-on-one basis, and I'm seeing a shift. Like I'm seeing a shift in the conversation, and the dominant conversation with them is that they're realizing that they might not want to do this forever, and energetically they don't want to be driving all of their energy towards the business already. And so the conversation is, well, how much energy does it take to get a 30% return in your business versus how much energy does it take to get a 30% return in investing? Now, even if you don't get a 30% return in investing, some years you might get 10. What's happening is you're getting that compound effect, though. You don't get that compound effect in your business if you're just bringing in earned income and then it's going right back out the door. So it ends up, what happens is net, what you start to see is that you're actually creating these additional incomes with very little energy that are then completely changing your life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's brilliant. And I just love hearing what you see, what's trending and how everyone's shifting. And that was a big thing for me too. It was like, oh my God, why put all this pressure on one source of income? Right. And so with that, we have you have your workshop coming up. I highly recommend, it's a free workshop. If any of you are interested at all in getting into the stock market, building wealth, like just even exploring like what this would mean, like this workshop, check it out. It's free. It's called the Wealth Building Series for Spiritual Entrepreneurs. And she writes, discover the keys to building massive wealth, the real way to keep your money safe. We touched on both of those, and how to create your own successful wealth plan, which just so freaking valuable. So that they can sign up. The link will be in the show notes. You can follow Elizabeth on Instagram at Elizabeth Ralph, because if, for the financial stuff and for the animals, we need both.
I know, you get both around here. Again, I can't separate them, right? And
Yeah, you can't separate them.
no, and all the spiritual jargon about money, which ends up, it's fun.
It is. And you do such a good job. And then your podcast, which is The Spiritual Investor,
Yep.
we'll link all of that, because I found early on that having Elizabeth in my life has totally shifted my understanding and conversations around money. And your gift, one of them, is making and building wealth accessible and demystifying it so that we can all access it and experience the fun and the joy and the power that comes with doing that. So thank you for that, Elizabeth.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I mean, it's a co-creation process, right? And so, working with people like you, having these conversations, like it's building it up for all of us. So I appreciate you saying that because, you know, people help me. I feel like we all bring through information for reasons, right? And people like you help that process come through, and it's I can't even believe I get to do this, to be honest. Like, I mean, I'm pinching myself all the time with this. I'm sure you feel the same way. I mean, the stuff that you do with, working with people on becoming aligned and tuning in with their inner awareness. It's amazing.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before I let you go?
No, just how amazing you are. And just let all of your listeners know that since the day that I have met you, I have always told you the same thing. You are the light, which they already know because they're here listening. And I will never forget, like the first time we met in person, when we finally got to meet at BBD Live, and we're all sitting there. And of course, you bring out of your bag like all this peppermint oil and all these treats. And I just love it. Speaking of stories, I literally hang on to your stories. Like, there's never a time that I log on Instagram that I don't watch your stories, because you're always talking about, like, you're always in some fun situation, or you've got some cool thing that I need to buy at the organic store.
Yes.
So we're just all adding to each other's lives in such an amazing way.
It's so true. Like when we have people like this in our lives, we get to up level each other, and it's just like we come together and just pure expansiveness happens.
It does. And like we get to witness it. Like, we're inside of that now, like,
Yeah.
we get to, I know that we're going to be looking back on these times and being like, oh my gosh, remember at the beginning of our journey
Yeah.
when we met? I think we've known each other, like, has it been 3 years? It's been 2 at least.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's crazy.
I know. Well, and I'll just bring it back to the wealth building and finance, because it's the same thing when, for those listening, once you get started on this journey, you're going to be looking back and be like, remember when I bought my first stock? And like looking at your stock accounts with like the expansion and abundance that's happening there, because you're up leveling and you're showing up with your money for your money and seeing that exchange as well. And that's Elizabeth's magic touch, is to help us all do that in a very aligned and joyful, playful way.
Yes.
So thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth. And everything for everyone listening will be linked up in the show notes, so you can join the wealth building workshop starting September 7th. You can follow Elizabeth on Instagram, and you can listen to her podcast.
Yes.
So until next time, thank you for being here, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone else for tuning in. Thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tuning In podcast. As always, if this would resonate with anyone you know, please share the episode. You can follow along with my journey on Instagram at Dana_Evans, or find me on my website at alignful.com.